Welcome to episode 3 of the Value Exchange podcast. Today I'm joined by Ben Andrews. Thank you for coming in today. And can you just give a little bit of an introduction to yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so my name is Ben Andrews. I'm Managing Director of a community interest company called Beyond Empower. And Beyond Empower is there to make mainstream stuff work better for disabled people, particularly in health and wellbeing space.
Can you take us back to the beginning? So what kind of motivated you? What was the driving force that got you involved in this work, basically?
Yeah, I think to start off with, I'm registered blind. I've got a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. And that involves the rapid deterioration of my eyesight. So it don't mean that I can't see anything now, as some people might think if you say you're blind. But it means that your eyesight deteriorates over time. But growing up, I never had particularly good eyesight. So I had general poor vision. I had night blindness, still got night blindness. I think growing up with this condition or any other condition, you sort of become aware of how things are built with you in mind, whether it be street design, posts, trees, signs, just placed all about the pavements. Whether it be when you go into the gym, there's weights left all over, there's no sort of tactile instruction or audio instruction how to use machines and stuff like that. So I was able to manage, but you look around and you see that a lot of the world just isn't built with you in mind, sort of thing. So growing up with that, and the other side of it was when I was growing up, I'd get like letters through the post to say, come to this youth club for blind people or come to this football group for blind people, whatever it was. And that's all fine, but when I was a kid, I was going to mainstream schools, I was going to youth club with my mates, so I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, I think, in terms of why am I expected to go to these things and everyone else can go to whatever they want to. So growing up with that, when I was about 17, I was at a bit of a loose end, didn't really know what I was doing. Come out of school, messed about a bit too much, didn't get the grades I was supposed to have. And then I started going to the gym with family. So my mum, my dad, and my brother Jake. And my mum has the same condition as me, but hers was a lot more progressed because she was older. So seeing her in the gym just sort of brought it home about how inaccessible that space was. Like I said before, there was weights left all over. The equipment had no tactile or audio information. The staff weren't sure how to respond to her, how to support and stuff like that. So being the family that we were, we sort of cracked on and made it our own sort of thing. And then slowly over time, the gym environment started changing. So people become more aware. People started putting the weights back before you was tripping over them. People in the gym responded to you in a bit of a different way. So it just struck me how disabled people or people who might operate in a bit of a different way to most other people in a space, how that can change the space. It can make people more receptive to that person or that group of people. So that was sort of the thinking initially. I didn't know where I was going to go with that, but I knew I wanted to do something along the lines of supporting disabled people to access more mainstream stuff as a way to improve that environment for disabled people. So that's sort of where the initial idea came from.
It's that almost started on a smaller scale, just in your gym that you went to growing up, and then you thought, I could probably do this on a larger scale. And that's exactly what you do now, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, I didn't know anything in terms of how I would set it up as a company or a business. I just knew that there was a bit of a gap in terms of, I knew people who were disabled were more likely to be inactive. You'd see a lot of disabled people as Paralympians, but there was no sort of average Joe. It was always an extreme. It was either you do nothing or you're going to be a Paralympian. So I knew there was a need for the majority in the middle who just wanted to access the gym or go for walks or running or whatever. So I started volunteering around Salford, just having a look around, see what was available for disabled people to keep active alongside non-disabled people, and speaking to disabled people about their experience of accessing mainstream stuff, and just found it to be a lack of opportunities. There was opportunities for disabled people to do things on their own a lot of the time. So we've got a gym for deaf people that's 4 miles away, and you've got to get there and all that type of stuff, but there was nothing on your doorstep that everybody else was going to that you could just go to as any other customer and access. So again, at that point, even though I had all this information, I didn't really know what to do with it. So I went to Salford Uni and just said to him at an open day, look, I've got this idea, don't really know where to go with it. And they said, you'd be ideal for a course, exercise and health sciences. And I completed an assignment on that. I didn't have like the UCAS points or anything to get in, but I completed an assignment, got in, and just my time at uni was spent looking at the cost benefits to the NHS and social care of making mainstream stuff work better for disabled people. Because what was happening and what still does happen is that because there's a lack of mainstream health and wellbeing stuff for disabled people, people deteriorate, people end up needing specialist care through the NHS and through social care, and that costs a lot of money. So even though that wasn't my driving thing was equity and trying to make things equal and fair for people. But I knew to enable me to do that as a career, I'd need to get funds from somewhere, and the NHS and social care, it was a decent argument to say if you invest in this at a relatively small scale to what you're paying now, then that will save you money long term.
So what you got into was quite niche from a young age. You said that was 17. Obviously you didn't have the grades to get into uni, but you was proactive, went to an open day. Did you go to college?
Went to college, I did health and social care, which is a random one. But I did that because I come out of school, expected to get good grades, always being pretty bright, but not doing. And then when I went to college, all my mates was doing sport. And I thought, if I do sport, it's going to be the same. I'm going to come out of college with exactly the same, feeling distracted, messing about and not getting any grades. So I thought, I'll do health and social care. And it was a nightmare, to be fair, for 3 years because I didn't know anyone in there. It was mostly girls going into like nurseries or nursing or something like that. But it gave me a different outlook in terms of what to go into further down the line. You was learning about long-term conditions. You was learning about how to support disabled people and that type of stuff. So it gave me a different element to my game, if you like, than other people might have had going into sort of similar fields of work. So
yeah, I think if you went and did sport, you probably wouldn't have looked at anything related to disabled people. Would you agree?
I think so. Going off what my mates had told me who did sport, I wouldn't say that it's something that they cover. And now having done my health sciences degree at uni, it wasn't an area that we touched on there either. We did a lot around long-term conditions and stuff, but there was nothing specifically around disabled people. So that's something I'm speaking to the uni about now to see if we can get as a bolt on for master's students.
Right, okay. Yeah, so that's something you just did in your spare time at uni, doing that research.
Uni suited me because I think in school and college everything felt like quite regimented, and that I just didn't respond well to that. I need to be, you give me what you want and let me go off into my own little space and do it. Keeping me in a classroom just doesn't work for me. Whereas uni was, sometimes they'd say that you have to come in 3 days a week and you won't be in once because the lecturers would just send you an email, go, it's called off today. And but here's the assignment we need you to do, or here's a spec sort of thing, the criteria, and then I could go home and do that in my own space without any distractions. And I come out of uni with a first class honours degree because that was the best way for me to learn.
Yeah. But you was given ownership of your time, and I think a lot of people learn better that way. I think sometimes when you're in school and college and you're working towards, you just got a timetable, you got to be here, you got to learn this, even if it's got no value in 3 years. Or you're not interested in it, whereas uni, you get to tap into something you're interested in. In your case, you was doing, was it health and exercise science?
Yeah, health and exercise science.
Whilst researching everything around disabled people. So I think that set you up nicely for when you left uni. So what was that transition from university to kind of working life like?
Yeah, when I was at uni, because you're given a bit more flexibility about assignments and stuff, you can dictate what the titles are. So the lecturers will offer you some titles to say you've got to do it on this particular subject, but sometimes they say if you have an area that you want to look into, then do it. So I was doing things like the cost benefits of exercise versus medication for disabled people and stuff like that. So by the time I left uni, I had all of the learning and a case to put forward to the NHS to say, here's how much money you could be saving. I couldn't articulate it as well as I can now, sort of thing, but it was sort of it was a very obvious logic. If you're not diverting these people who are costing you a lot of money into things that don't cost a lot of money, then that's going to cost you more money long term. Yeah. So they bought that argument, and it was through the NHS is basically split up into local authorities. So we had a Salford NHS. So they had some funding available called innovation funding, which was new ideas to support good health for Salford residents. Yeah. So I submitted my learning through that. They said, we really like the idea of what you're proposing, but we can't fund you as Ben Andrews because there's no accountability there. You could just get the money and go on holiday for all we know. We can't tie you down to it. So they said, so you can either set up a company, which I didn't feel ready for, or if you know another organisation that could act as an incubator or a parent company, if you like, then they can employ you and you can deliver the work, but it'll be under a bigger umbrella. So luckily at the time, I was working for an organisation called Unlimited Potential, and they specialise in social innovation and helping local people develop ideas and improve things in society from their own lived experience sort of thing. So it was right up their street. So I was already working for them as a health trainer, and that was just working generally with people in Salford, not necessarily disabled, but just trying to get them into employment or into the gym or whatever the goals were. So that gave me a good foundation as well. So I went to Unlimited Potential with my idea and said the NHS are willing to back it, but I need somebody to hold the money basically. Yeah. So they said, well, we'll employ you on a part-time basis because that's the only money they was giving me for that time, and then you can deliver it. And then we had an agreement in place that when it got to a point where the money was sufficient, I would transition into an independent company. That's the point I'm at now. So initially, I was piloted it in the Broughton area of Salford, just 11 people. And the question was, do disabled people want to keep active in mainstream places? Which sounds like a stupid question to me, but you have to prove every point in research, don't you? So it was meeting with 11 disabled people who mostly wanted to access the gym. And I think the gym's an interesting place because it seems so scary for a lot of people, and when you're offering disabled people the opportunity to go and access it with someone with a familiar face, and you're also providing a bit of assurance that, you know, if a staff member's in there and they don't know how to communicate, I'll do that, I'll sort that out. Or if there's weights in the way, I'll be moving them. I mean, I probably won't see them myself, but if any changes that you need in that environment, I'm going to push for, I'm going to back you sort of thing. So I think that was a bit reassuring. And then, so we did that with 11 people, and that proved the point then to the NHS, like, disabled people do want to access this stuff, we're going to have to make it more accessible. So then they expanded the project to Swinton, Eccles and Pendleton areas of Salford. So I delivered that for another year, and it was just years worth of funding at this point. It was like pilot funding. So after that second year, it was successful. And I went and said, I need more than a year here. We need to do, 3-5 years. It's a culture change this. I need to be in an area doing this consistently, driving as many disabled people as I can to access the stuff that you've got going on locally to make the change that we need. And he said, we really like what you're doing, but you're not getting enough people through the programme. You're only working with people one-to-one. For it to be investable for us, it needs to be getting tenfold more people for the programme. You need to do it in groups. And I was opposed to that because I don't believe in grouping people based on just being disabled. That was sort of, when I was a kid, that was the stuff that used to jar me a bit. Like, why should I have to go to that club or group just because I share an impairment? As I've got older, I've become a bit more mellow about it because there is something about having a community and people sharing similar experiences. It's definitely something there about that. But I don't think it should be people's only option. No. So I was a bit opposed to it. And then they said, if you can prove a group-based model in a different way, then it could be something that we invest in. So if you can go out and pilot that, then come back to us. But they didn't give us any money to pilot at that point. So I was out of work for about 3 months. And I got invited to a presentation. I just acted as though I was still working, though, sort of thing, when I'm speaking to people. So I got invited to a presentation in Trafford at the cricket ground. I presented there, talked about Empower You, talked about the impact we've had and how I wanted to spread it. And then off the back of that, a few areas got in touch around Greater Manchester. A lot of them fell away, but one that picked up was Trafford. And Trafford Council said, we want you to deliver what you've done in Salford, but with groups. And again, I was having the same, I don't want to group people based on being disabled. We said, look, we've already got groups in Trafford who are established. They're already operating together as disabled people. Yeah. So why not just engage those groups and get them more active and make the stuff they want to access accessible? So that was sort of a middle ground happy medium for me, because I still got to engage some individuals. But if there was already groups of people, fibromyalgia groups, people with learning disabilities accessing day centres, who were more than happy to access spaces together, then who am I to say that that's wrong? So I worked with those groups for another year, got them in, proved them a group-based model, and then Trafford said, we really like what you're doing, we want to commission this now for, well, it ended up being a 4-year contract as a proper commissioned service, and then we've just got another 3 to 5 years contract with Trafford. And then at the same time, I took all of the learning back to Salford and said, we've gone away and done what you've said in Trafford. Can it now be commissioned in Salford? And they just held their hands up and said, what can we say to that? Well done. And of course, we'll commission you in Salford. So both commission has been fantastic. Even when lockdown hit, our contract started just as lockdown hit. Wow. And they were just really supportive. I was worried about contracts getting pulled and stuff like that, but they just said, do what you can. And we did some really good work during lockdown. So
you never ran away with the money?
Never ran away with the money, no.
That's quite a long journey, actually, because I had this idea, because obviously you went to university and you kind of knew you wanted to work with disabled populations. I thought you'd kind of come up with this idea of a company, and that was your vision in terms of, right, I'm going to leave uni and set a company up. But actually it was the other way around, where you submitted your research, and then they was like, we can't give you this money, we need to give it to a company for some accountability, essentially.
That's exactly it. I didn't feel ready to set up a company. I mean, knowing what I know now, having set up a company, I'm really glad that I didn't, because you're bombarded with policies and procedures. You've got to have governance in place. There's all sorts. Now I've got the time, I've got a team. I can dedicate some time to do some of that stuff. Yeah. But at the time, it would have been so much harder trying to deliver the work, develop it, and get all of that infrastructure in place.
Yeah, when you're operating as one, you have to wear all these different hats. It gets difficult. So something you've touched on a little bit was kind of gyms being miles away for people to access, a lot of segregated provision, so just classes or provision for just disabled people. Obviously you've made it clear that this is not something you should do or is needed, but obviously does exist. We're now aware of how physical activity impacts mental health. Research is unambiguous in terms of physical activity is good for mental health. How does the lack of physical activity impact the mental health of disabled people, in terms of, it's not a choice that they're not being inactive, it's because of the barriers that they face? Do you find there's that added element of frustration?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we all have stuff to worry about and barriers to navigate to physical activity, time, transport, other commitments, that type of thing. But some of those things are things that we take on. So we might choose to have kids. Yeah. We might choose to have a job at a certain time. I mean, we do have some restrictions in some ways. You have to do what you've got to do sometimes. But for disabled people, or some disabled people, so for example, when I want to go to the gym, I can't drive. So I need to walk or get the bus or get a lift or something like that. So let's say I was being completely independent and I wanted to walk. I've got to think about, on that walk to the gym, what's in my way? Are the crossings going to have tactile cones on and stuff like that? I mean, I've got an okay level of vision now where I can see, but it's always nice to have the stuff like that to rely on. Am I going to be able to see the bus numbers? Is the lighting okay? There's all of these things that contribute to additional barriers that you've got to consider as a disabled person, and each disabled person will have their equivalents of those barriers. For wheelchair users, it might be, actually, there's not one drop curb on my way to the local gym so I can go swimming. So I literally can't get there without transport. I've got to pay a premium on taxis to get there because there's not that many wheelchair accessible taxis. People with learning disabilities. When I go to the gym, I'm given a gym program that feels like I'm reading the Matrix because it's full of complicated words and numbers. And that's the case for a lot of people, not just people with learning disabilities. Whereas so those things aren't necessarily on the person. That's not a choice that they've taken. That's not something inherent to them. That's the way these things are set up. Streets don't have to be designed with a load of clutter. Taxis don't have to charge a premium if there was more readily available for wheelchair accessible taxis. Gym programs don't have to be put across in a way that is really difficult to read. They could be put across in easy read for people with learning disabilities. So it's those additional stresses that exclude disabled people from being active. And I'm not saying in all cases, like everyone.
Yeah.
Some disabled people don't want to be active. They're happy with the lot. I don't want to be active, and that's that in the same way a lot of humans do. But for a lot of disabled people, there are additional barriers there than other people might face to getting active. And not just to the gym. We do a lot of work around making walking routes more accessible, parks, green spaces, street design. We support people to access gardening, photography, arts, crafts. It's whatever gets people moving. And in each space, there's a number of barriers or changes that we might make for that person to enable them to access it. And don't get me wrong, it's not always us. Sometimes the provider of the activity is clued up and they'll make the changes. Yeah. And I've never come across a provider who's purposely excluding disabled people. Nobody builds things and says, I'm going to put that there because we don't want disabled people coming in or whatever it might be. It's just a lack of thought and awareness sometimes.
Does that go back to the segregation if you think about the history of disabled people? For people who don't know that, do you want to just give us a little brief of that?
Yeah, so I think if you go back to, what year are we in now? If we go back to sort of up to the 1960s, the vast majority of disabled people, particularly people with learning disabilities, people with some physical disabilities, would have been segregated in mass institutions in the middle of countryside. My mum was a social worker, and even going back to when I was a kid, she was a social worker for people with learning disabilities, and she'll go to a place called Calderstones, which is a hospital. Well, they called it a hospital, but people never left. It was just a big institution, well out the way in Calderstone. I don't know where that is, but wherever it is, it was there. And people were just housed there forever and a day, and that's where they existed. And then even people who now would say have got a mental illness, they would have been siphoned off to those type of places too, in what they would have called mad houses and stuff back in the day. So because disabled people have been held in these places, segregated from society for so long, we've not needed to adjust things in mainstream society because we've had no pressure on us, if you like. The disability rights movement pushed that, and then we got legislation and laws put in place. But legislation and law is one thing, but culture and a mindset isn't. They're not working together. They're not at the same pace. Yeah. We might be back here. The legislation might be a bit further along. So in our brains, we don't always think about disabled people, and I don't just think it's disabled people. We don't think about people who we don't share that experience of, because we might be able to put ourselves in people's shoes to a certain extent and appreciate some stuff, but we can never really understand it. And to be on the ball about everyone's needs at all time is pretty impossible. So I get it, but it don't mean that it's right, and it don't mean that we shouldn't be pushing to make the changes. So I think now society is in a place where it wants to be accepting and it wants to make things better for people. So we're sort of playing catch up now with the infrastructure and provision and stuff like that we've got in place, which is dated, a lot of it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would be like me on this, where I have no clue. Like, an example I was going to use then, 99% of the time I'll put my weights back in the gym. Sometimes if I've got a big weight and I don't want to carry it all the way across the gym to put it back, I might just roll it a little bit under the rack. Yeah. But I don't think of them things until it's been like someone like yourself says that. And something else that always stands out, obviously I've got you on LinkedIn, and something you shared a while back was bins. So obviously when they empty the bins, they're often just left all over the path, and I couldn't walk past it. So how can someone visually impaired, how can a wheelchair user navigate that with already existing barriers? So until you're coming forward and making us aware of these experiences, it's just not there.
Yeah, I know, and it's not just, I think, one thing I found most useful is to not just talk about disabled people when we're talking about these things. So, for example, I go to the gym with my missus, and she knows I can't see the weights to put them back. So I will put my own weights back, but sometimes I'll miss a weight that someone else has left or whatever. But the thing that stuck with her about putting her own weights back is when I said, she was leaving them on the machine once, and I said, nah, put them back, because if somebody not as strong as you gets on there now, they're going to struggle to get the weights on and off. So that stuck with her. She's now thinking of probably young girls coming in who are going to struggle with the weights. So, and in the workshops that I deliver, I always talk about, because I think when disabled people ask for adjustments to be made, the sort of knee-jerk reaction is, it's going to be a lot of money, this, and how are we going to do it, sort of thing. And something I always share in workshops is how we've made reasonable adjustments throughout history for other groups too. So, for example, before the 1920s, women didn't have access to female public toilets. It just wasn't a thing. Women didn't operate in the public domain. They was at the homes doing the housework, and that's where a lot of men thought they should be. So they said there's no need for us to have female public toilets. And that was a reasonable adjustment for women. But we don't think about it in those terms. So when I bring that up in the workshop, I always do at the start, because then I can guarantee I've got 50% of the room on my side going, we need to start making changes for other groups. So it just brings it to life a bit more. So for me, a lot of the changes that would make for disabled people would benefit other groups too. And for me, it doesn't really matter what people's motivations are for making a change, whether it's about a disabled person or it's sort of thinking, actually, my mum's going to be pushing a grandkid and I want to make sure all the bins are back so she didn't have to go into the road, or or my granddad's getting on, he's not got the mobility or the strength that he used to. I don't want him walking in the road because of the bins. So it don't matter, as long as the bins gets moved, I don't really care who people are thinking about. It's just making it as relatable to people as possible.
100%. Like I said, I can't walk past them half the time. I have to go onto the road. But I like that example of the women's toilet stuff. I think we're so far separated from that. Like you said, I think it was the 1920s.
Yeah.
We don't know about that.
No, we don't know at all. But when, like, in the grand scheme of life, 100 years, it doesn't feel that long ago.
No, not at all. But
it doesn't feel that long ago.
When you bring it up in workshops, I bet people start tapping in then and going, "Oh, yeah, you're right." And to go back to the legislation, obviously there's not much enforcement around it. So why should organisations consider introducing provisions or improving accessibility for disabled populations? What are the incentives?
I think a big incentive for organisations, I always try and, I'll talk about the ethical perspective, we want to make society inclusive and all that type of stuff, but businesses have got a bottom line and things like that. So if you want to look at it from a purely business perspective, disabled people and the families, because the families of disabled people, if you're not offering a service for their family member, then they're likely to take it elsewhere. Yeah. So as a collective, just in the UK, the disabled people and the families have got a spending power of 274 billion per year. So it's a lot of money that businesses are losing out on by not making the provision accessible. I've got clients who every year I'll walk into their house and they've got big thick shag pile carpets, a new one every year, TVs on the walls, they're going on months cruises, they're on top what benefits, and they're entitled to them as well. But I say, why are you spending your money in this way? And it's got, we've got to get rid of it because we'll get it taken off us if we don't spend it. So that could be spent with local businesses and services if it was made more accessible to those people. So I think that's the biggest one. It's a massive untapped market. It's a potential market you can spend a lot of money with your. I don't know any business, especially at the minute, who can afford to be excluding groups of people. And some of the changes, they're not a lot of money. Some of the stuff is, when you're marketing, are you marketing through channels that disabled people might engage with? That doesn't cost a lot of money. It just takes a bit of thought beforehand. The other side of it is, I think sometimes it's not money for people, it's the time that it'll take to do that initial bit of thinking. So, but with a little bit of thought, you can engage untapped markets, you can get more income, get more footfall, and your offer will improve and become more accessible for others because of it.
Maybe just putting it on their radar, that's a massive amount of money. What's generally the reception when you telling businesses the spending power of disabled people?
Some people don't believe it. It's not my research. It's by Scope, a big national disabled people's organisation that specialises in research. So it's called the Purple Pound. So I think there's a bit of disbelief there and wow. And then you get some people who it won't change anything. You know, it's still a load of hassle to try and put these changes in place. But you get the majority of the group going, wow, we do need to do something here. But I think the other thing with around disabled people is people don't like the thought of taking money off disabled people. So I don't like when I bring up that figure. I don't think anyone's ears prick up like, oh, this is a massive market that we should be taking money from, because I think because what we were talking about before about the institutionalisation of disabled people has also been a massive charitable way of looking at disabled people, as though disabled people should be given things for free, we need to do them favours and stuff like that, and I don't necessarily think that perspective helps disabled people.
No.
So I don't know, it's the first time I've thought about it actually, but I don't know whether people's reaction, if you said it about another group of people, they're worth that amount of money, or there was a market, let's get people out of the equation, if you said that market's worth that amount of money, a lot of businesses would be all over it. But I think when you make it about people, and especially disabled people, given that people don't want to be seen to be taking money off disabled people, even though some have got a lot of money to spend on things.
Yeah.
I think that can be a blocker sometimes for people, but it's still worth knowing, because it will prick some people's ears up.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't say it's taking money off them. They're choosing to spend that money, and they want to spend it. So instead of that new TV or carpet, they're using it to access a gym or walking group or however else they kind of want to spend the time, and they're not being able to because of these barriers.
Yeah, it's just viewing disabled people as people and saying, as any customer, they don't want to spend the money. And the disabled people that we support to access activities, they pay for the activities. That's part of the art, because we want to get people to the point where they don't need us anymore. So we don't pay for anything, we don't apply for any funding. We will work with people, help them identify what they're interested in. Walking, gardening, the gym, sports, whatever it might be. We'll go out and find those activities, make them accessible where they need to be, and then it's down to them to pay for it. And we're there for about 8 weeks to support them to access it and build up a bit of confidence and get a routine going and stuff. But then everything should be set up for them after the 8 weeks to continue paying for it and going. And that's where the majority of the people that we work with end up. They keep going beyond our support, because we're doing all that groundwork initially to get them used to paying for things and get them used to going. And
I love that. Are they not reliant on you then?
Yeah, that's the point.
Give them the skills and tools, the confidence of just getting in the gym, like you said, then they can continue on from there, that journey. I know something you do pre-program, you do like health checks, physical health, obs, whether blood cholesterol, blood glucose, BMI, stuff like that. Do you do anything to measure mental well-being?
Yeah, we use something called an outcome star, which has got a load of research behind it. And there's different types of outcome stars for different things. But it's, aside from just mental health and mental well-being, it's around happiness and fulfillment. And so it actually looks like a star. It's got 8 points. And each of the points covers a different aspect of a person's life, what contributes to making that person feel well. So the first point's around lifestyle, and that's around what are your health behaviours like? Are you active? How's your diet? Are you smoking? Are you drinking? That sort of thing. The next one's around looking after yourself. How independent do you feel? The one after that is managing symptoms, and that's around how do you currently manage with your physical health or your mental health? Are you medicating, or are you doing anything else to support your mental health and well-being? The next one's work, volunteering and other activities, and I think that's the purpose point of your life. Like, what are you doing in your life that's giving you a bit of joy? It don't have to be work, don't have to be volunteering, but have you got a hobby? Do you want to try anything new? The next one's money. It's not around how much people have got, but it's around that we know how money and debt can hang over people. So it's are you having any issues with money? Are you struggling? Are you in any debts? Where you live, we all know people need, like, that's a foundation level thing. People need somewhere safe to live, and so we look at that. Family and friends, what your relationship's like, and then the last point is feeling positive, and that's around just generally how do you feel. And people rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5 in each of the areas, and 1 being that's, you know, it's the pit sort of thing, and 5 being it's the best it can possibly be. And we take those measures as well of health at the start and the end of the 8 weeks to see the progress through the programme. But the outcome star is also good because it gives people the opportunity to talk around them points.
Yeah.
So as well as rating themselves, it's never just as straight as that. It could take about 2 hours, the outcome star sometimes. So they'll talk about, if they're saying I'm not active, what did you do when you was a kid? What have you enjoyed doing in the past? Have you ever wanted to try anything? I don't manage my symptoms very well. Why? What are you doing? Well, I'm taking 25 tablets a day or whatever it is, and I'm not doing anything else to manage it. My money, I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. So, because sometimes we'll go to meet people, there's no point in talking about getting active. If people, well, you can have a bit of a conversation, but if people are in really bad place with the housing and the money and stuff like that, we can then signpost people to citizens' advice and housing organisations and debt advice services to get them in a better place, so that maybe they're not right for the service at that time for us, but in 8 weeks' time, some of that stuff might have settled, and we can come back in and say, right, we're ready to get active now, and they're in a much better place to do so.
Yeah, I think all them points interlink. One will impact the other. But like you say, if the basic needs aren't being met, they're not ready to be physically active. They're not even something they're considering. They want to get other things straight first. Do you have any stories about kind of someone you've worked with, not just from like a physical health point of view, but that mental health journey they've been on?
Yeah, I think the one that stands out to me is probably one of those first 11 people that I worked with. Because as a service has grown, people now do a lot of the delivery, and I'm not as involved with people, which I miss it massively, but I'm just not. That's how it's a sort of the bullet you've got to bite to expand and grow and stuff. So, but one of the first people I worked with was a guy who was blind. He had the same condition as me, and that might why it resonates a bit more as well, but it was more progressed. And not just more progressed, but it come on earlier in life for him than it had done for me. So he had more or less no sight in high school sort of thing. But we got on really well. It got referred to me by his GP. He's in a bit of a bad place mentally, not in particularly good shape physically, but dead shatter, proper charismatic, just a dead nice guy. So when I first started working with him, he said, I want to get into running, I won't mind running marathons at some point and stuff like that. So, and he'd never had any experience of this before. So the first thing was getting down to the gym, going back to what I said before. He didn't want to be getting taxis all the time, and it would have cost him a bomb, and that would have been another barrier. So he wanted to get used to using his white cane. That can be scary for people. It's a bit of a, I don't know, I have a white cane, and I will use it sometimes when I'm struggling at night. And it's, I don't know what it is, but there's something, it gives you a weird feeling in terms of, I think it's like a glaringly obvious statement that this person's blind sort of thing, and whatever people's connotations might come along with that, you can make up in your head a bit. I think sometimes you do overthink it, but for a lot of people it's something that takes a lot of guts to do. So I rated him massively that he wanted to try it. So we started going to and from the gym, using his white cane, getting him used to using it in that space, and he learnt the route. And I knew that after 8 weeks of doing that, I could leave him in a place where he could get to and from that gym on his own, which is the point we wanted to get him to. So we went to the gym. He needed some minor adjustments on the treadmill. At the time, it was getting yellow bits of tape and putting him on round bits of kit. That's what it was like when I was first starting out. Just so he could identify bits of the machine a bit more. There was a gym down in Broughton, brilliant gym. Said you can use this for free with people whenever you want. So we went down there, and he was on the treadmill, building his fitness up. We'd get on the weights and stuff like that, and he stuck at it. He stuck at it for the full 8 weeks with me. He continued it. His mental health started improving. He's gone on now. He runs multiple marathons. He's in a good relationship. He's moved out. He's just in a completely different space. And yeah, what's nice is that we meet like as mates now, and we never talk about that because what I like about the people I work with, they forget that we've had any level of engagement with them in that way. Like, because they've moved on so much in their life, to look back at it is like, wow, we started doing something together, and now I'm at this space. And yeah, a lot of the time people just forget about us because they don't see it. We're the initial support, but then they go, oh yeah, I've gone to the gym with such a body for years, and they forget about what initiated that initial bit, which I love, because we're not there to be in people's heads. We're just there as a little trigger to get people going, and then take us out of it.
Yeah, that's what you want though, essentially, isn't it? So he's running marathons off the treadmill.
No, he doesn't like. He does it with a guide runner. So if you a guide runner is someone where you'd have like sort of it's not a handcuff, but it's like a loose rubber cuff sort of thing that you'd stand next to someone with, and they'd have it attached there, and another person would be running alongside you, and they sort of say, right, we're going left in a minute, or right, we're coming up to a bit of bumpy terrain, or whatever it might be. So
that's sick. When you mentioned it, obviously you started him on the treadmill. I was started to think then, is he doing it marathons on the treadmill?
Yeah, no, that'd be boring, wouldn't it? But no, he's out. He's run Manchester ones. He's run them all over the country.
Yeah, that's sick. That's just proof what you're doing works.
That's why it works perfectly well, where someone's motivated and they engage with the programme and they just grab it. I mean, it takes a certain personality. All credit to him. He's built in that way, where he just needed a bit of support to get going. Not everyone has that foundation. Some people are just not at the right time in their lives, not in the right place to make the most of it, but he was. So
love that. That's all sick.
Yeah, it's a top story.
One of your goals then is to change mainstream provision. A lot of segregated provision exists. Obviously, you've said you're not a fan of that. It doesn't need to exist, essentially. Although people are accessing it and using it. Yeah,
to the same. I mean, each to their own is my thing now. When I was younger, I was probably a bit more adamant about it. And as I've got older, I do, like I say, I appreciate the community that having segregated provision can bring. And people don't like the term segregated provision. That might seem a bit harsh, but and some communities and some people will prefer it. So, for example, we tried to set up an integrated yoga group with the deaf community and hearing people, and the deaf community just said, we don't want this. We can't communicate with the hearing community that well. It's just complicated, it's stressful trying to lip read all the time and stuff like that. We'd rather our own yoga group. So I'm not going to dictate if that's what people would like. And we've done that. We've set up a group of people who are deaf who want to access aerobics and yoga, and they do that, and that's fair. They're entitled to do it. Again, I think when it's a choice, it's fine. It's what breaks my heart is when we speak to parents of people with disabled children, and we go, oh, they can go to a mainstream gym, or they can go to this photography club, or they can go down to this dog walking group, whatever it is they want to do, and they say, yeah, but they won't be safe there, or they might get bullied there and stuff like that. That's the worst for me, because then it feels like you're not doing that because that's in that person's best interest. It's because of the way people might treat them, and that's sad. And then we are, like I always say, do you think we're going to let anyone do that to anyone who's referred to us? Like, it just, I think people build, and we do get it sometimes. Sometimes we'll support people in the gym and they'll be shouting out, and because that's how they communicate. And you do get people in the gym or other activities who will not respond to them in a very nice way. They'll mock the voice, or they'll be sniggering to each other, and we do pull them up on it. But what I always try and assure people of is that fades after 6 weeks. People get bored of being bothered about how that person communicates or responds or looks or reacts, and they actually start liking and interacting with the person. We've supported a lad recently down into a gym in Salford, and when he first went, the staff didn't know. He shouts out, he's autistic, he shouts out, but he's not. He won't really converse with you. Like, he'll respond to what you're saying, but it won't be in a coherent way. So he's shouting out a lot, and people in the gym are responding to him in strange ways. Few nasty comments that we've had from people, but after 4 weeks, people are waving at him, people are smiling at him. He's giving his card in, the staff are saying go in and all that. He's just like, he just owns the gym now. He just does what he wants in there, and everyone's sound with him. And we just get bored of responding to people in negative ways, and people they just don't last in those places very long, because the other people who are the majority end up getting sick of the negativity and saying move on. And it's not specific to disabled people, because if you look at sort of like black communities before the civil rights movement and stuff like that, they was excluded from every space in society. And if we look at education, it took, do you not think like parents of black children were going, we can't let them go to the white school, they'll get bullied, and they got like hammered, bricks thrown at them of adults and all sorts. But it took people to start that. It takes people to sort of saturate mainstream places for it to become normalised. And then over time, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, it definitely does, but over time it becomes much more acceptable and normal for a certain group to interact with another, and it becomes much less acceptable to respond negatively to that. And that's, so when parents are saying, I can't let my kid go there, it sort of guts me because it's sad, but it also guts me because I think, but that's got to start somewhere. We need some brave people who would never let anything happen to the people that we support, but it's just it's tricky, it's putting yourself in an uncomfortable position where you might be exposed to something negative. But
yeah. And I guess as a parent, you want the best for your kid, and you even just thinking about someone bullying your child because of they're disabled, they've got learning disabilities, or just being bullied for any reason, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's just a tricky one, isn't it? Because even though it's best for the immediate, it might not necessarily be best for the future, because not at a big societal scale, society don't get used to that group of people then. But at a lower scale, mum and dad's not there forever. I need to learn how to respond, I need to learn how to look after myself, or I need to create a network around me of people who can do that for me, and I can't do that unless I'm put in these spaces now. And we see that a lot with people where they're sort of crying out for independence, and sometimes the parents with the best will towards that kid don't let them be independent because they're so worried. But then, like I say, parents aren't there forever, and then that person ends up in a not very nice place, completely dictated what they can do, when actually they could have been fairly independent if they would have been given the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing about independence and resilience. You've got to face difficulty alone to develop it, and sometimes parents don't want to give them that freedom.
Yeah, it's not just parents of disabled children either. It could be any parent, so sure. It's a tricky one.
But going back to segregated provision, obviously you said some people like it. Some people say it's just easier if we can all communicate easier with each other. We don't have to lip read. For someone who maybe wants to integrate within mainstream provision, but there's no opportunity to, and maybe there is segregated provision but not many people are accessing it. Obviously that style that you do, one of them is family and relationships, or like a support network essentially. Do you think segregated provision hinders the development of that?
I think it does have the potential to. As long as segregated provision exists, there's less need for the mainstream to adapt, because disabled people are being looked after elsewhere, sort of thing. But what I would say is I do feel like we're getting towards a balance now. When I first started, a lot of the stuff I was saying was just not being, it was just like, oh, whatever, like, we know we should be doing it, we're not doing it, what can you do, sort of thing. Whereas now, it does feel like you're pushing an open door, the conversation's flowing a lot more easily. So it feels like integrated provision does want to become more inclusive now. And I feel like there will always be a need for segregated stuff, because some people will prefer it, and it might be right for some people, and it's all about choice. So if you want to access that, then that's fine. But it will be a choice, and you'll just have to access more. So I think segregated provision was hindering it, because integrated provision weren't willing to hear the conversation. But now I think they're willing to hear, and they are adapting, and they're making changes. It's like the recent active live survey by Sport England, disabled people's activity levels, or the number of disabled people who are now active, is up by 4.2% compared to the last survey. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a massive jump. It's 40 million disabled people in the UK. We've had a 4.2 increase. It's significant. So things are changing. So I wouldn't say it'll hinder it. I think it has done in the past, but I think now we're probably going to have a balance where it'll just be giving people just have more options, integrated, segregated, or I might skip in between. Because segregated stuff, as I've come to learn, like VI football, visually impaired football, is a sport in its own right. So actually I might want to go to a mainstream gym, but then on the weekend I might want to go and play visually impaired football, and see the people who share the same experience as me and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there's definitely a place for both, and it's just integrated, continuing on that path of becoming more inclusive. And I think I've noticed the most change in that since sort of the George Floyd incident and the Black Lives Matter movement, where there was a massive spotlight shown on inequalities communities was facing, and I don't think it just shone a light on the inequalities sort of black communities were facing. I think it's just gone diversity as a topic. If you have a protected characteristic, what can we do for you to make sure what we're doing works for you, sort of thing.
Like I say, it's a choice. That's the most important thing. Like you said, if you want to access it, it's there. If you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But over to you now a little bit, actually. So obviously we spoke quite a lot about well-being, and running a business must take up a lot of your time, you know, at full capacity all the time. How would you prioritise your well-being and kind of look after your own mental health while running a business?
Yeah, I think one of the best things I did was when I started, I wrote myself a job description and a contract like I was an employee, because I am. It's my company, but I've got a board, so I've got a 35-hour contract. I will work more than that contract if I need to, but it's a job. I treat it as a job. I'm passionate about it. When I'm in work, I work intensively. I'll eat. I won't be taking 30 minutes for lunch and stuff. I'll be eating my food on the go and stuff like that. And if, like at the minute, we've got a lot of reapplication going and I'm putting in longer hours than I might do. Yeah. But I'm passionate about it. I enjoy it. But I think that was what I'm learning from a lot of other people who found companies and stuff. They burn themselves out. Like, I'm working 12-hour, 14-hour days and I'm not seeing my missus, I'm not seeing my kids. And I think, big clap for you. Like, that doesn't sound very nice to me. So I think treating it as this is a job, I've got a 9 to 5. That's how I treat it. I'll put more hours in if I need to. And then having other stuff. So I think what I found difficult is I love, as a weird topic it is to love, like access and inclusion for disabled people. Like I enjoy it. I enjoy the history about it. I enjoy seeing changes be made. But that passion doesn't just exist in my company, sort of thing. So I found it hard to sort of separate myself in some ways from the company, because I thought Beyond Empower it won't, because we're in a good place, but if it went bust, my passion wouldn't go away with that. Yeah. So I found other, like I create content, I've got some children's books out around better places, which is to help children think about how places can be made better for disabled people. So I've got other creative things that I can put my energy into. And that gives me a bit of like a relief. And then I think for me, always prioritising my family and my partner over my job. So I don't know, I would never turn down seeing my niece and nephew because they had something on at work. I just wouldn't. I'd find another way. I'd squeeze it at another time, for example. Whereas I think people put work over all else. And you might feel good, you might have more money in the bank, but I don't know, there's just something it just wouldn't fulfill me. Yeah. It just wouldn't fulfill me doing that.
Tells me a lot about your values though.
It's important. Your job can go, your business can go. It's a big punch in the stomach to lose a family member. So
yeah. So obviously you just mentioned the book. One, you should have brought it today.
No, I should not. I am the worst salesman ever. Honestly, the amount of events that I go to, people go, "Oh, where's your book? I want to buy one," and I'll go, "Oh, they're at home in my office." So yeah, we'll have to start. Put it in the back there.
Bring one. Tell us a little bit about the book. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I think so aside from all the experience that I've already shared, I think doing what I do as a job, I work with adults all of the time, and I work with adults to make this stuff work better for disabled people, whether it be street design. We're doing a lot of work with Transport for Greater Manchester at the minute around making transport more accessible. And like I said at the start, nobody purposely makes their stuff inaccessible to disabled people. It's done through a lack of awareness. And while that's nice to hear and to know, when I'm delivering these workshops, I go, "Oh, Ben, we never would have done this if we knew it would have impacted people so much." As nice as that is, because there's no malice there, it's like, that's got to stop somewhere, that cycle of just not being aware. And it will eventually, because people are tipping towards becoming more aware. But I thought, how can we get the message out to kids more easily around access and inclusion for disabled people? And I think there's been a lot of stuff done where people have gone into schools and done Q&A and motivational speaking and stuff like that, but I feel like it feels quite heavy. Access and inclusion for disabled people feels quite a heavy topic. Yeah. People are very passionate about it. It can feel quite daunting. And I think because of that, it disengages people from the conversation. And I just don't think kids would get behind something so heavy. Yeah. So I thought, how can I get it across to them in a bit more of an accessible and a fun way? And then it led me down the route of writing children's picture books. Never been... I was all right at English in school. That was one of the subjects I was okay in. I still didn't get good grades in it, but I was all right in it. And so I started writing. I've always liked writing. I like writing bids and applications and stuff now, but I started writing, forming the characters, and it just spread from there really. In 2020, I started sending it around to publishers, and a publisher picked it up called Tiny Tree Children's Books, who signed me up, and got a five book deal with Tiny Tree. So nice. First book's out, Better Places, Nicky and Candy Street, and then the next one, that's around a young girl who's blind and a white cane Candy. So the white cane is a character too, and Candy's sick of being swung into bins and bags and posts and trees and that. So they asked the reader to help make the street a better place by flicking the bins out of the way and pulling the bags into the right places and stuff. And it was just a way of making it more fun. And I love it. Aside from having a book, which feels like a good accomplishment, just getting into the schools and having a laugh with kids about access and inclusion, and like, I don't know, it's just a break from the adult world in some ways as well, because you can imagine a lot of the meetings that you have around, this costs too much and we've not got the capacity to do that, whereas kids are just like, just put the sign in a different place, or just put that tree there. So they get it. When we're kids, we get it. It's built out. It's sort of sucked out of us by bureaucracy and budget and stuff like that somewhere along the lines. But
I imagine that's very straightforward. They just say, well, we'll just move that there.
Yeah, we'll make it a different colour. Yeah, why not? But and it's so I get a lot out of it, and it gives you a bit of faith that it's not innate in us to not want to make things accessible, and I know that because of what adults tell me, but it just sort of reinforces that, and it's just becoming an adult, and the layers of stuff that we have to deal with, and the systems that we have to work within that actually stops us from making stuff. But the good thing about those things can be changed, so that's a positive.
I think it's moving in the right direction.
100%.
I like the medium you've gone with, like the books and stuff, because I think, like you said, just going in and speaking to kids about inclusion, accessibility issues, one, it might go over the head. Two, they might just be like, what is this? Like, just who's this guy? Like, but when they've got a book and it's a lot more relatable, it's a fun way of learning for people, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. And when we go in, I do an interactive reading of the book, and we get them all chanting and singing and stuff like that. We've had Ofsted in there just like taking a look. I got a report once from a school sent to me off Ofsted saying, first time I've heard kids sing about poo, and he was singing like, put the dog poo in the bin in this it is. I have a lot of fun doing that, and then we go into the classroom and we do lessons depending on which year group it is. So we'll do like white cane making with the younger ones, and we'll do an activity where we go outside in the community and we find places that wouldn't work for Nicky and Candy in the book, and then go and do a design activity and to make it a better place, and then we send that to local MPs and stuff to see if they can make places better in their areas. So I want like an army of kids just bombarding their MP, saying we need to move this, that and the other to make it more accessible. But that, when they grow up, they're going to be the planners and the engineers and the MPs, or the people who can put the bins back on their own and stuff like that. So it's just good awareness to have from a young age.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Just starting that conversation at a young age, so they're then aware of it as they're growing up. Because it's great doing it with adults, but if you can do it with the next generation, then they can make that change. Because it's not lost on adults, but if they don't pass that down to their children or the younger generation, it's then lost again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So love that. Where can people buy the book?
All good bookstores. Not the physical ones though. It's like online, WH Smith, Waterstones, Amazon. So yeah, anywhere like that.
You need to plug that better.
I know. The next one, we've got another one coming out in. Well, the date's not set for launch yet, but that's around access needs of wheelchair users. That's Anthony and William Street, so that'll be out next year, more than likely.
So we got a few on the way.
Yeah, we've got 4 more coming out. That'll be the first series all focused around street design. So the first one's Nicky and Candel, and it's Anthony and William, which is access for wheelchair users. Then we've got access for autistic people.
William.
No, it's good that, isn't it? Yeah, that's my missus. I can't take credit for that. She came up with that name, co-author. And then we've got the deaf community, which has a bit of sign language in, and then someone with a physical disability to round off the first series. And then I'm hopeful that we could do another environment. We might do Better Places the playground, or Better Places the bus, or Better Places the school. So it's endless for me. It's just whether the publisher want to take it on again.
Is that probably a more fun part of your job? Because obviously you said you're a little bit more separated from the frontline stuff, actually getting in there and delivering sessions.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel like a job that so much. It's sort of like a nice thing on the side. Yeah. So my job, my sort of strict 9 to 5, if you like, it goes beyond that a lot of the time, but it doesn't feel like it. But like I say, I always make sure it's balanced with other stuff. This feels like something that I put a few hours into a night. Just try and get into schools and stuff, and develop the learning resources. I've got loads of plans for it. Yeah, just having the time. That's the thing. Time's the most important thing, because with time you can put your energy into whatever you want to. Yeah. But the more you put your energy into, the less time you have to put it into other stuff. So it's just, I had ideas for other projects, but I feel like now I just want to focus on Beyond Empower and the books, and then I'll create a bit of content on the side, sort of thing. Well, that's it. Otherwise, you run yourself too thin, and you can't really put anything into anything. Yeah. Nothing's as optimal.
Yeah, for sure. Was there ever a point where you kind of struggled with that time, not time management, but time allocating them time resources, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's a constant balance, and I just think how you're feeling day to day fluctuates and changes. So sometimes I'm full of beans, and other days I'm knackered. So I just don't have the same energy. I think as you get older, though, you sort of learn more about yourself, and so now I know that past like 2 or 3, don't ask me to do anything too complex, because my brain's not there. So I book all the heavy stuff in the morning, and I know I'm most alert from like 7 till 12. So that's my heavy stuff. That's when I get my head down. After that, I'll respond to emails and less onerous stuff. Then you get your second wind later on in the night, but that's when I'll start doing some book stuff. So it's just like, because I think without knowing things like that about yourself, you can beat yourself up about, why am I not being productive now? Well, because it's 5 o'clock, you've had a full day of work, and you've done whatever else, and you've got no energy. So yeah, that's been helpful. But I think the books would have struggled to come out if it wasn't for lockdown, if I'm honest with you. So that's where I put a lot of the energy into writing them and getting them out there, because it felt like the world was sort of on pause. So I felt like I had a lot more time. I was doing all the work that I needed to do, and then I had loads of time to do book type stuff. That's not the same anymore, even though, I mean, obviously lockdown's gone, but people are working from home a lot more. There's not that travel time, but it's like the intensity of work has caught up now. Yeah. So that time just doesn't exist anymore. It's absolutely bizarre when you think about how much time we should have in theory, like considering how much people used to travel, and people used to have to go to face-to-face meetings rather than just getting on. You think we'd have loads of spare time, but you just don't, do you? You have less. Yeah. No worries. Thank you.
I feel like I've kept you here way too
long. I'm enjoying it. I've not spoke like that for a long time. So
I appreciate you coming down and having this chat with me today. Before we wrap up though, where can people find you and the work you do? Where can people buy the book? Look into the camera and tell them.
Ben Andrews Inc. is the best place to follow me on social media. That links out to Beyond Empower and Better Places, so everything can run through there at Ben Andrews Inc.
And the book?
Yeah, the book Better Places, that can be found on Waterstones, WH Smith, Amazon, any of the good bookstores, and again at Ben Andrews Inc. It can all link through there.
Cool, thank you.
Nice one.